Ave Regina, Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo, estes nostra salve.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. As Jesus came down from the mountain with Peter, James, and John, and approached the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them, and the scribes arguing with them. Immediately on seeing him, the whole crowd was utterly amazed. They ran up to him and greeted him. He asked them, "What are you arguing about with them?" Someone from the crowd answered, "Teacher, I have brought to you my son, possessed by a mute spirit. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him down. He foams at the mouth, grinds his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive it out, but they were unable to do so." He said to them in reply, "O faithless generation, how long will it be with you? How long will I endure you? Bring him to me." They brought the boy to him, and when he saw him, the spirit immediately threw the boy down into convulsions. As he fell to the ground, he began to roll around and foam at the mouth. Then he questioned his father, "How long has this been happening to him?" He replied, "Since childhood. It has often thrown him into fire and into water to kill him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." Jesus said to him, "If you can, everything is possible to the one who has faith." Then the boy's father cried out, "I do believe. Help my unbelief." Jesus, on seeing a crowd rapidly gathering, rebuked the unclean spirit and said to it, "Mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." Shouting and throwing the boy into convulsions, it came out. He became like a corpse, which caused many to say, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand, raised him, and he stood up. When he entered the house, his disciples asked him in private, "Why could we not drive out the spirit?" He said to them, "This kind can only come out through prayer." The Gospel of the Lord. Before I get into the text, first of all, the feast of St. Peter Damian today. If you think the church is bad today, you should read about what he was dealing with. There's a book called Gomorrah that he wrote. It's very interesting. 11th century. St. James starts to discuss something that he says is demonic. It's fitting to go with this passage. Bitter jealousy, selfish ambition in your heart. Wisdom of this kind does not come from above, but it is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. Having that in mind, Jesus comes down from the transfiguration with Peter, James, and John. Okay? He is coming down. He is coming down to enter into the demonic. Because the wisdom from above is not happening in this place where he's at right now. He comes down from the mountain and he sees the other disciples, not Peter, James, and John. Okay? They're arguing with the scribes. All this bickering. What they're probably arguing about is the scribes had rituals for exorcism. And they were probably fighting with the disciples about how my prayers are better than yours, okay? And they were arguing about who can do this, who can't do this, and why it can't be done. Your disciples were unable to drive it out. So the disciples even are probably involved in this festering argument and all this division, all this bickering, jealousy. My prayers are better than yours. There's no humility here. And humility is when we do things under the divine authority. They're all arguing because they're thinking about their way and their prayers and their way of doing things. But nobody's really looking up to heaven and saying, God, can you come down here and help us? So Jesus comes down from the mountain of transfiguration. And his first words are, O faithless generation. O faithless generation. Welcome to America. The father of this child typifies the faithless, at least for the moment. And he says to Jesus, so here's the problem, if you can do anything. He has no idea really who he's talking about. This is also part of the problem. He doesn't understand what Jesus can do and who he is. So his lack of faith has something to do with ignorance. Not as an insult, but missing knowledge. Okay? So if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And so he's making a plea. And Jesus says, there's a couple ways to read this, Jesus' response. You could almost read it with a question, like Jesus saying, if you can. But the way I read it this morning, if you can, everything is possible to one who has faith. In other words, Jesus, is calling this father of the afflicted child, the possessed child, he's calling him to a higher faith. If you can, everything is possible. Can you have faith in me? Jesus is asking. It's an invitation to greater faith. And here it is for all of us. An invitation for greater faith. It's the only way to survive in a depraved world. I do believe, he says, help my unbelief. Now the guy is really praying. First, he's making a request, mostly out of self-interest and out of the interest of his son, of course, in love. However, now he's making a sincere prayer to the Almighty. He's looking above, not at the bickering of the world below. I do believe. Help my unbelief. Now he's really praying. The Catechism has this to say in a commentary that I read. To persevere in faith until the end, we must nourish it with the Word of God, who is Jesus, and beg the Lord to increase our faith. Instead of saying, I'm losing my faith, we need to pray and beg the Lord to increase our faith. And we rise above the bickering. Many said he was dead. Jesus took him by the hand. He touched him and he raised him up. He stood up. Only through prayer can this be done, Jesus tells the disciples. It's an invitation for us to stop and pray rather than bicker and backbite. The prayer of faith consists not only in saying, Lord, Lord, but in disposing the heart to do the will of the Father. And here it is. That's it. The will of the Father. Prayer to seek and do God's will. In this case, it was God's will that this demoniac would be healed, and he was. And our sincere seeking of deeper faith, however, with the humility of according to God's will, is the prize for all of us to search for today.
Regina Celi,
Letare, alleluia, qui aquam merum isti portare, alleluia, resurrexit sicut dixit, alleluia, ora pro nobis Deum, alleluia.